and then I just don't. So I don't really vote, mostly because I did. A few years ago I voted for someone, I'm not going to say who, and every time I see that fucking guy's face in the news, I want to kill myself. But I don't know what the future holds. I find it.
Nick, you talk a lot about the writers who've influenced you or inspired you in the Sit Back song with Auden and Berryman and Patti Smith. And
I don't aspire to that. I just love those guys. They're kind of on a different level.
Do you feel like that? Them standing behind you is a positive influence? They're sort of supporting from behind, or is that a pressured influence?
Are they an oppressive?
Yeah, or a pressured, is the pressure of influence?
There's a wonderful phrase by Jonathan Lethem called The Ecstasy of Influence, or is the name of a book of his, which I actually haven't read, but the title is really wonderful. And I understand that, and the influences of people are hugely, maybe quite evident in what I do, but certainly I don't find a problem with that. I feel to remain open to your influences is absolutely important. I think one of the great problems sometimes for writers is to find your voice, and in the finding of your voice, shut down those avenues of influence. For me personally, I try and remain open, and I'm always looking, and I'm always collecting, and I think if anything keeps me going creatively and keeps doing new stuff or developing creatively, it's because of those influences.
Hey Nick, I've got a question for you, which is again connected to the Sit Back song. And one of the things I love about it is the kind of seamless way in which you move from prose to poetry to prose to poetry. And I just wanted you to say...
Is that Jamie?
It is.
I want to use my publisher. I don't fucking believe it.
What I wanted to ask was, like, at what point did you decide that certain things should be told in prose and certain things told in poetry? Because the fairy story is told in prose, but
Yeah.
the Dylan thing at Glastonbury is a brilliant poem, and I just think it's very interesting the way the book weaves between the two forms.
Yeah, when we were talking about it, thanks Jamie, when we were talking about influences, one of the books that actually, I mean, there's a riff in the book where I'm trying to explain what the book is to you, and there's just this endless view of comparisons to who it might be like. And one writer I left out of that is Michael Ondaatje, because of those early books that he wrote, particularly Pat Garrett and Jesse James, the left-handed poet, and the wonderful book on Buddy Bolin, which is this kind of mashup of... he started off as a poet, and it is this mashup of poetry and prose, of this wonderful way Ondaatje has of viewing things from a great height and then telescoping down into excruciating and often violent detail. And that, I read those books when I was very young, like 18 or 19, and I always wanted, they actually were the first time I read poetry that really blew me away. Out of the stuff that I learned at school, I just read these two books, especially the Billy the Kid one, and it just blew me away. And it is that mashup of prose and kind of high poetry and low poetry and limerick and all sorts of lists and all sorts of stuff, which is actually quite like the Sick Bag song.
You talked about using the writing the Sick Bag song to kind of carve out some creative time whilst on tour. Did you find that engaging in that process altered the gigs themselves at all during that tour, or were those 2 hours completely separate from that process at all?
I'm not sure whether that. The tour is great, and it's very little about the actual about performing in the book itself. Mostly because it's very difficult for me to recall in any kind of pleasing detail or any detail what an actual show is like. I can remember the band rooms and I can remember the after shows, but the actual show itself is something that I find very difficult to kind of recall one from the other. Not that they're similar, but the state of mind is very different when you're on stage. So I'm not sure.
Is that really true that you dye your hair?
You're an Australian. Occasionally.